Hi Greedy 3Ds. Today's going to be a little bit different. I've been asked in some of the comments, can you talk us through the first stages of the print rather than just the paint process, how you get the resin to the final quality print that you are painting up. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to do some work on the Naru Model by Wicked. So I will take you through the process of what I do from the slicing stage. So we're going to start off on Chitu box and I'll talk you through step by step until we get to the end result with the printed product. Hope you enjoy, and if you like all things 3D printing, don't forget to subscribe. So everything's been loaded into Chitterbox using version 1.8.1, and this is how I've laid it on the build plate. I've reduced everything to 75%, just basically so I can fit everything on there. Now I'm going to hollow everything out, and I think that's really important to save your resin. So I'm using a 3.9mm hollow, and there's my settings there, and voila, press the button and everything will hollow out. Now what this does is a couple of things. It saves you an awful lot of resin, and it makes your model a little bit lighter as well, but there's a few things you've got to do with it to make sure that it's safe. So once you've hollowed it out, you must add some holes in there, and I'm going to use some 6.5mm holes, and that will become apparent at the end of why I'm using holes that large. And just find some spaces in the model and click them in there. Now I don't save the little bits, the little plugs. You can do that, there's an option to do that, but I don't do it. So pop some holes in there, and it's really important you do this for drainage. You do not want uncured resin in your models. They will split without doubt. A little bit of heat, a little bit of time. If you haven't holed them out and you haven't cured the insides of them, they will split, and we'll talk about that at the end. I'm going to show you what I do with them afterwards. So when you've got all your holes in that you're going to fit, now sometimes you'll find that where you click will not put a hole, and that's fine. You might need to reduce the size of the hole a little bit just to make it work. So just tweak it and twiddle it, change the size of the holes. Find out what works for you, go around the model and just add those holes in, but I can't stress enough it's important you do it. Now you will see me at the end, we'll come back to this, I'm going to drill a few holes in where I've been unable to add them in this post or pre-process. I'm going to add them post-process with just a little 6mm drill, just to make sure that my models are not going to split or ooze out resin at the end of it all. And as I say, that is a really important part of it. So there you go, we've loaded the models on, as you can see. The orientation, I've make sure that there's gaps between them. I'm trying to put things as well so that I'm using minimal supports. And what I'm going to do over on the supports now is adding a raft. I always use a raft. You may not, but this is how I do it. And these are the settings that I'm using. Now I'm using heavy supports, and I'm using quite a high density of supports. As I've said, these are my settings. I'm not saying you must do it this way, but I have found with my Saturn that I have had a lot of things sticking to the FEP, so I have to bolster the supports to make them work. Again, these are my settings, you don't have to copy them, but this is what works for me. Now I'm going to add those supports in, as you can see there, and using auto supports, which I always use. But what I'll do now, I'll just have a little look at the model and I'll just go around it and see if there's any little islands that are of red that have no supports on there. And if I see any sections of red that I think, you know, I'm going to give this a little bit of extra support, or I'm just going to bolster the support there, I'm going to add them in. And Chitterbox allows you to do that easily by just literally left clicking, and away you go. I'm going to add them on places as well, like under a chin. Chins tend to fail sometimes. You might not have experienced that, but I know I definitely have. So I'm just going to give a few more supports on the chin area there. And there you go. So there's plenty of supports on there. But if you can see some red areas, I think I probably overdo supports, and that's from failure after failure in the early days of using my Saturn, where it just was sticking to the FEP. So I have gone a little bit over the top, and I'm sure you'll agree I have, but I know that this will come out one piece, so I might use a little bit more resin, but I know it works. And there we go, it's all done and dusted, as you can see. These are the settings that I'm using. And for my print, usual things really, 2.5 seconds each layer, 35 seconds on the bottom layer and 5 bottom layers. And if that little warning comes up, it means that one of your rafts is just poking over the edge. It's absolutely fine. Tell it yes anyway, and away you go, and you can slice that model up. Now it's not using too much resin here, just 204 mils, which is what, a fifth of a bottle, which I don't think is too bad. If you hadn't hollowed it out, boy, you'd be using a hell of a lot more. I'm just going to save this now onto the computer. I haven't got my USB stick in at this point, so I'm saving it directly onto the computer. But if you've got a USB to hand, save it directly to your USB. What I have done now is I've gone and fetched my USB stick, and I'm just going to have a quick look at it just to make sure I've got enough room. Always check you've got enough room for your models, and I've got a gig left there. That's absolutely. I want to get onto the model whereby you've loaded it on and only half of it's gone on. I've dragged it onto the USB drive. It takes a little bit of time to copy across, so I've sped the process up just a tad, and that is now on my USB drive ready to hit my printer. I've built the second part, or I've put the second part on there. There's I had to do it in two parts. The dog is there and a few other bits and pieces like the bow. And I'm just going to use Chitterbox here just to move things around, just to make sure that nothing is touching, that I'm happy with the orientation, that everything is where it should be. Now the bow, this is how I've orientated it. You may choose to do it differently. You may choose to orientate the whole model differently. Again, this isn't a you must do it this way video. This is how I do it video. And I'm going to do exactly the same process, hollowing out the model to a 3.9mm wall as I did in the previous one, and you'll see me go through the same steps, adding in a hole, trying to get a 6.5mm hole to make sure that I can fit my inside curing lights in there at the end, and away you go. So I'm just going to look through the model now, see if there's any places I can add a hole to. Simple as that. And I know now that that model will drain really, really well, and I'm not going to have it splitting a month, 6 months, 12 months down the line and ruin all that hard work that I'm going to put into it. I'm reducing the size of the hole, and I'm going to go around and find. You get the picture, don't you? Make sure you add holes to your models. And if you can't add holes to your models, drill them in at the end post-process. Same settings for my raft, same settings for all my supports, and I'm just going to go around and fill up some of those red areas just to make sure I give it plenty of support. You will have to do a little bit of post work when you get it off and a little bit of sanding to get it all working, but well worth it to know you're going to get a successful build. I'm slicing the model here, and the amount of resin that I'm going to use for this one is only minimal. There's not too much on the plate there. It's just about 90 mils. So I've not used a vast amount of resin for both models, which is absolutely great. Going to save it exactly the same as I did before, and job is a good one. Right, moving over to my Saturn now. I'm going to pop my USB drive into the side of the Saturn, go down to the front screen and select the print option. And once I've selected that, choose the model that I want to print. Press print, and away we go. And then the process will be that the build plate will fall slowly, not this quickly, into the resin. Nothing will overflow, I am absolutely confident, and the first layer is going down there, and that's the printing process now began on my Elegoo Saturn. Right, so it's about 8.5 hours later, and the water washable Elegoo resin has done its job absolutely admirably. And I'm using a Green Tree Tech build plate here, a flex plate, and I've just took it off. That's how easy it is to get off. And voila, everything as printed, 100% perfect. All that pre-prep work and the support settings and everything else have made this model, for me anyway, come out absolutely marvellously. And I've printed it in my shed. It's been fairly cold in there, around about 7 to 8 degrees, and everything's come out really, really well. Now, I'm taking the models off the supports now carefully, because there's quite a few delicate parts on this model, but take it off as best you can. Give them a little waggle, give them a little pull, and off they will come. And now, with everything off, pop it into some cold water. This is the first process of cleaning, so into cold, clean water. It's water washable, so I can do it. And with the flex plate, watch this. This is how easy this stuff will come off your flex plate. No banging it, no scraping it, no worries, no problems. There you go. A little twist, a little poke, a little flex, and it's all come off. Now I'm going to give it a little bit of a scrape, but I need to clean that as well. So I'm popping that in the cold water first. Okay, taking everything out of the cold water now, what I've done while it's in there is give it a waggle, emptied it out, give it a waggle, emptied it out, making sure I get as much of the inside resin out that I can. And I'm going to move it on to the second process, which is hot soapy water. into the basket, let it have a soak for about 3 or 4 minutes. Just give it a waggle while it's in there. And once I've done that, I'm going to get the pieces out one by one, wipe them over in that warm, soapy water. Where the holes are to drain it, I'm going to fill it up again, give it a shake, tip the water out, fill it up, give it a shake, tip the water out. It's so important you get the resin that's inside out. And if you get parts that you couldn't get holes in, or the holes are blocked, or you want to put extra holes in, just take a drill, take a 6mm setting head drill bit and drill the holes in. Now there was a couple of bits on here that once I'd done that to it, I really noticed a lot of resin coming out, and if I hadn't have done that process, then the model would very likely have split at some stage. It's not just water washable resin that splits. Any of your resins can split. So it's really, really important you get all the resin in there out. Can't stress that enough. That's a really important role. Okay, there we go. Another hole going into one of the leg, onto the boot bits. And what I noticed with the boot straight away was once I drilled the hole in, some resin came out straight away, and that would have been trapped in there. Be careful, it's wet. Don't use electric drill, use a rechargeable one. Make sure that you're careful. You don't want to be drilling your fingers and your hands. Be really careful with it. I'm not suggesting you need to do this or should do this, but this is what I do. If you're going to do it at your own risk, and please be careful. Right, I'm getting the plate now from the Green Tree Tech Flex, and I'm just cleaning it off. Now it's had a soak in some hot water. Any little bits that are on there will quite easily just scrape off with your scraper. I'm going to do a little bit more work to the plate at the end, which I'll come back to. Now you can dry it one or two ways. I'm just using a kitchen roll here, but you can use a hairdryer on it to get a lot of the water off it, because if you don't, you'll get like a white stain all across it. So dry it. I'm popping it on my Mercury Plus curing station there, and I'm giving it around about 2 minutes just to give it an initial cure. And while the first section is curing, I'm going to be drying out the second section. And I'm going to be using this to cure the inside. I made this. It's just a bits of wire, some UV LED lights, an on-off switch, and a connector for a 9-volt battery. And all I'm going to do with this is connect it all up. And where I made those nice big holes in it, it allows me to feed these LEDs through and actually cure the inside of the model, as you can see me doing here. So push them in right inside as far as they'll go. And then when you turn it on, leave the UV lights on for a good 2 to 3 minutes, if not a little bit longer, just to make sure that everything cures. Now, the reason I did 3 UV lights is it means I can do more than one bit at a time, or I can put 3 in there and make sure you leave it for a few minutes. I'll usually come back and give it a little bit of a waggle and a move around just to make sure that that UV light touches everything in there. And by doing this, by cleaning it properly, by a double cleaning process, by making sure you've got supported drainage holes and plenty of drainage holes in there, and by curing the outside and the inside, it will mean that when you finish your model and you glue it all together and it's sitting on your shelf and you're so proud of it, you're not going to come in one morning and the whole thing's going to be split open with a big puddle of resin lying on your floor. If you're a 3D printer, you've come across that. You will have come across that. And if you haven't, you're really lucky. Follow these processes and that will not happen. So I'm just making sure I put everything back on my Mercury Plus, and I'm curing the above and below and around, and everything's having a cure. Everything's having a few minutes. I want to make sure that it's thoroughly cured for the painting process. So make sure you turn them over, make sure you run them again a few times, use that little UV light in the holes, move it around, waggle it around, leave it in there for a few minutes. Everything is cured. So important to do this process. And there we go, it's all done and cured. I'm just doing a quick test fit just to make sure everything fits where it should be. Now, this wicked model has gone together marvellously, but this would be the time, if needed, I'd just sand down little bits just to make sure everything fits again before the painting process begins. And I'm really happy with the way the whole thing so far has gone together. Well done, Wicked. Now that build plate I told you about, I'm just taking a P60 sand paper, and I'm just going to give it a bit of a blast over. This allows the resin to stick to it much better when you put it back in the vat. Get all the bits off, all the nastiness from your sanding. And the great thing with these flex plates is you can literally leave your build plate on. You just need to pop your flex plate on and pop it off again. So make sure you get the resin off the bottom of your flex plate and just pop it back on. Now I'll leave a link in the description to where you can get these flex plates from and the resin, etc. And if you buy from me, being an Amazon affiliate, it will mean that I can make a little bit of money back for the channel, but it won't cost you guys any more, and it means you support the channel a little bit. Okay, so I'm just using that plastic scraper to gently push through the bottom of the FEP to make sure there's nothing stuck to it. Again, I do this, you don't have to, but I want to know there's nothing going to damage my FEP when I put my next print on. And I'm using this UV water washable resin. I always use water washable. Give it a shake. I've poured it into the max line, and I am now ready for my next print, and I'm going to do the next one. Now, I'm not going to take you through the whole of the next print. You get the gist of what I've done. The same process will occur here as occurred with the first one. I'll print it, I'll take it off, I'll wash it, I'll drill holes, I'll swill it out properly, I'll cure the inside and outside, and the model is done and dusted. That was part one. Part two is going to be either painting Naru, or I'll show you how I printed the Predator. I'm going to do that a little bit differently, so make sure you tune into part two. There's going to be a few parts to this build. I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe. See you on the next Greedy 3D video.